Bring out the talent.
Bring out the talent.
Bring out the talent.
Welcome to Bring Out the Talent, a podcast featuring learning and development experts discussing innovative approaches and industry insights. Tune in to hear our talent, help develop yours. Now here are your hosts, TTA's CEO and President Maria Melfa and Talent Manager Jocelyn Allen.
Well, let me tell you that we have some of the best dancing ever today from our third-time guest who, I think she's already developed some dance routine to the theme song. So it's very, very impressive.
Lynn practiced in the car. That was a car dance if I've ever seen one. Absolutely.
Got to do what you got to do.
Very, very good. Like to see you on the dance floor. I bet you have some very good dance moves there. If you could do it while sitting down, it's very impressive.
Thank you. One of my rare talents.
One of your many, many talents. Well, we're excited to have you back, Lynn.
Excited to be here.
Yes.
Love you guys. Love the show.
No, we love you as well. That's why you are our only guest that we've had on 3 times.
Third time's a charm.
Yes, exactly. Third time is a charm. Absolutely. So
Yes.
Obviously we love the content that you provide and your thought leadership. So let's get going.
I'm excited about this one.
So today we are talking about something that quietly drives almost everything at work, but rarely gets measured in a meaningful way. And that's emotion. And yes, we all have emotions. Most leadership tools focus on what people think, what they do, how they perform. Very few look at what people actually feel, even though emotions are what drive motivation, trust, engagement, and culture. In this episode, we're diving into the 12 emotional gifts of leadership and the AgileBrain framework, which uses neuroscience and emotional data to reveal what individuals, teams, and organizations really need in order to thrive. Joining us today is our certified AgileBrain trainer and returning, as we mentioned, for the 3rd time, Bring Out the Talent favorite, Lynn Turner. Lynn works with leaders and organizations using the approach. Lynn is helping them better understand what is really happening beneath the surface and how to lead in ways that truly resonate with people. We're going to explore how emotional needs like safety, autonomy, inclusion, and justice show up in real workplaces, what happens when they go unmet, and how leaders can start creating cultures where people genuinely want to do their best. Welcome back again, Lynn.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Very excited. So for our listeners who are new to AgileBrain, can you start by explaining what the program is and how it differs from the typical leadership or engagement tools?
Yeah. AgileBrain is, as you mentioned, a neuroscience-based framework that measures emotional needs, not personality, not preferences, not opinions. Most leadership tools measure cognition, and that's what people think. But AgileBrain measures emotion, what the brain is activated by. It maps human emotional need across 4 domains. There's the self domain, which is the world within us, the material domain, which is the external world of work and play, social, which is about our connections and relationships, and spiritual, which is about our higher ideals and values. And then also across 3 different levels. A foundational level, which is about being, an experiential level, which is about doing, and then an aspirational level, which is about having. What I also love about AgileBrain is that it isn't just a modern leadership model. Dr. J.D. Pincus synthesized, there's a word, more than a century of motivational theory, everything from Aristotle and Maslow to contemporary psychology and neuroscience. And what kept emerging were the same core emotional drivers, and it all converged into this 12-cell framework. So when we talk about safety, autonomy, justice, or purpose, we're not talking about trends. We're talking about enduring human needs. And what makes it different is this. It uses rapid image exposure, so the brain responds emotionally before logic kicks in. That's a completely different kind of data. And in my work, that data changes the conversation. It really moves us from how do we improve engagement to what emotional conditions are driving or blocking performance.
How long has this program been around?
So Dr. J.D. Pincus has been working on this for decades, quite honestly. He's been researching the motivational theory, like I mentioned to you earlier. But it really started to emerge right around COVID, and they started experimenting with the framework during that time and have actually done some workforce listening studies, which are pretty fascinating. In fact, they looked at what was happening to people during COVID, right? Because the workplace was shifting, and what was important in motivating people at that time was shifting. And we kind of saw it, right, during COVID.
I really like this assessment too, Lynn, because when we were talking about it together a few weeks ago, there was question from really both Maria and I talking about, okay, this is a very different approach, right, to take the emotional route. And I think we've talked very regularly about how important connecting emotional self and professional self is, because the reality is that checking yourself at the door is most of the time impossible, because we are human beings, and the way that we react 100% of the time is emotional. So validating that this assessment tells you where you are right now is the point that I'm getting at, that this could be something that evolves and changes as you grow, as you learn, as you adapt, which I think adds a versatility to this assessment that not a lot of others have. Because again, Maria and I have had conversations where people have even like argued that fact in learning and development. I think assessments are kind of like this 50-50 polarizing type of thing. Do they work? Do they not work? How do you, like, people are different, assessments should be different, yada, yada. This one I really do think is probably one of the more like difficult ones to make those connections to, because we're talking about roots in emotion. But the profoundness that it kind of like gave me to be totally, I know that that's a big word and like holds a lot of weight, but genuinely I was, the millennial in me was like, this feels like a personal attack a little bit. All joke, no, like joking, but genuinely, it was that spot on to like how I remembered feeling when I was taking it. That I think that that's something to kind of be considered when we're having this conversation. People listening, is that this really is different, and this isn't going to be a one and done. This is something that you can use to continually evolve, both personally and professionally. And I checked into that with this assessment big time.
And that's an important note, right? Because I'm certified. I've been using assessments for decades now. So certified in DISC, and so the other thing too, DISC is non-proprietary, so lots of different companies own the rights to it, right? So certified in DISC, as well as another one that does get at motivators called Driving Forces. So DISC, and whether it's predictive index or Myers-Briggs, those kind of get at a style or a type. They measure slightly different things. So you really only need to take it once, and it should remain pretty consistent, right? But the driving forces that I was mentioning, I call those, it more looks at the stage, right? And what's important to us at this point of our life. So that one can shift over time. So like when we get out of college, it will show one thing, then we start a family, it might show something different, et cetera, et cetera. So different stages of our life. But to your point, AgileBrain gets at the state that we're in that moment. And it can shift over from moment to moment. And I know even you, Maria, kind of talked about, you kind of recognized the state that you were in when you took it, and how it kind of shaped what showed up.
Yeah, absolutely. That was very interesting, because Jocelyn and I did take the assessment, and well, first I ended up getting the wrong test.
Yes, I remember. I think Maria got mine, and she was like, "I don't know."
She got mine.
Yes, okay. And I'm like, I think so, because it shows like I want a lot of connection, and I'm like, actually, I'm feeling
very. I
feel like I
hated people.
Yeah, no. Not necessarily hated people, but at that point I was
No.
like, okay, I need more like alone
Space.
time. I need more space. I need to
Yes.
like take care of myself more. And
Yeah.
I just felt like overwhelmed
You were in a personal
with the
development kind
personal
of, yeah.
development. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So because we work with so many people, and between that and family members getting old and all that stuff. So I just felt like I wanted to move to an island on that day. So again, it was very funny because it said that maybe
The
I took it too
opposite.
literally. But I do, like Jocelyn said, it is very, very interesting. It's very cool, the fact that it gives you a snapshot of where you are. So another, when we're looking at this from a corporate point of view, emotion, not logic, drives motivation. So why is it such an important shift in how we think about leadership and performance?
Yeah, love this question. To me, leadership is at a turning point. Last year, I spoke at a leadership summit, and I spoke about the evolution of leadership and how it's moved from, if you think back Industrial Revolution, right? It was kind of that command and control, and then it moved to kind of this more about inspiration. And now it's moving more towards motivation, and motivation requires emotional understanding, especially in today's world. Today's world, we live in what I call VUCA, not my term. It's a term that came out of the military, but VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And if that doesn't really sum up our world today, I don't really know what does. But VUCA isn't necessarily about the change. It's really about the pace of the change. But the one constant amidst all this change is human emotional need. So what's fascinating is that while leadership models have evolved, human emotional needs haven't. That's why this framework feels both kind of ancient and modern at the same time. Emotions drive motivation. So if we don't measure emotion, we're solving the wrong problem. Traditional systems measure cognition. AgileBrain measures the fuel.
Love that. I love that too. And it's, again, making just so many connections, because I think about a big part of this podcast journey has really been connecting oneself to their professional and their personal environment. And I love how this creates all of those drivers. Speaking of those drivers, the framework itself centers on 12 emotional gifts, they call it, right? What are these emotional gifts, and how do they help leaders understand themselves and, I guess, their teams more clearly if this is rolled out in such a way?
Sure. And one thing, typically when I start off any session, when we're getting into this discussion, I ask the group that I'm in front of, human beings, emotional beings with logic or logical beings with emotion. And it's interesting, sometimes there's some debate, but the real answer is we are emotional beings with logic. And when I go through kind of some of the neuroscience, but for going back to your question about the 12 emotional gifts, as I mentioned earlier, it's built off of a 12-cell framework. And in those 12 cells, there are the 4 domains. And again, that's the self domain, which is the world within us, the material domain, which is the external world of work and play, the social domain, which is about our relationships and our connections, and then the spiritual domain, which is about our higher ideals and principles. And then within that, if you think about like Maslow, there's different levels. So that foundational level is really about being what we foundational, just those basic foundational needs, which are safety, autonomy, inclusion, and justice. That's at our foundation. Those are things. And what we're finding, we're using this in different ways within organizations as well as within school children, within the school systems. Because if those foundational levels aren't met, people aren't able to be engaged. And you're not going to be able to really do your work, or at least do it at an effective level, as well as for any student in school. They're not going to be primed to learn if those foundational levels aren't met. So that's the foundational level. The expirational level, or experiential level is about doing. And that consists of authenticity, immersion, which is about being in that flow state, caring, and ethics. And I'll kind of explain how these kind of roll into each other in a moment. And then the aspirational level is about having. It's about potential. It's about success. It's about recognition, and it's about purpose. So how this works is in that self domain, what it's saying is when I feel safe, I can therefore be my more authentic self and therefore reach my potential. So that's kind of how they roll into each other. In the material domain, it's saying when I feel I have control or autonomy, and I can therefore immerse myself in my work and get into that flow state where we lose track of time when you're really immersed in something. And therefore I can be successful at whatever that is, my work or play. So then moving over to that social domain, when I feel included or I feel a sense of belonging and I feel cared for, I can be recognized for my contributions. And then in that spiritual domain, when I feel things are fair and just, and I feel that I'm being treated fairly, which is the ethics, I can therefore reach my higher ideals and purpose. So I call them gifts because when leaders understand them in themselves and others, they become strengths. But if they're unmet, they can become friction. I worked with a business owner who had just completed a traditional employee engagement survey, and the results came back very strong. The results showed high engagement, high satisfaction, low turnover risk. But when he reached out, they said, I don't know how to explain it. The survey says we're fine, but something feels off. I'm sensing the meetings feel guarded. People aren't challenging ideas. It feels polite, but not honest. So we agreed to pilot AgileBrain with a cross-sectional because they had just gone through an employee engagement survey. So we just wanted to pilot to see if anything different came up. So we piloted AgileBrain with a cross-section of employees that were different tenure, different locations, different levels. And we looked at the data in an aggregate. And what surfaced wasn't low engagement. It was unmet justice, unmet inclusion, and unmet purpose. So people didn't feel unsafe enough to leave, but they didn't feel safe enough to speak. And they weren't as connected to the mission that originally attracted them to the organization. After we had conversations with the employees, that's what was coming out with regards to purpose, that they were originally attracted to the organization because it gave back to the community, but they weren't seeing that as much as they had previously. And so the traditional surveys asks, are you satisfied, right? But AgileBrain reveals, do you feel heard? Do you feel treated fairly? And do you feel you belong? And that's when they realized nothing was broken, but something was suppressed. And once we understood what was suppressed, we were able to address the root. So increasing transparency, reinforcing fairness, and rebuilding connection to purpose. So we were able to, and some of it was communication.
So as we were talking, Lynn, you had mentioned that 4 needs come up most often: safety, autonomy, inclusion, and justice. When one of those is missing on a team, what does that typically look like in an organization's everyday behavior?
Sure, yeah. So if safety is missing, I mean, it can show a lot of different things, but typically innovation drops, right? People don't feel safe experimenting or coming up with new ideas. People may be self-protecting, right? So those are some of the things. And safety too, when you look at the model, safety is the cornerstone of the model. So everything really kind of, it holds a lot of weight, right? When you look at autonomy, and autonomy is about having control, sometimes ownership fades, right? People aren't taking ownership. And maybe this is when micromanagement may creep in. because they're not sensing that people are taking ownership and accountability, right? Then with inclusion, you might get those quiet meetings or hallway conversations. It's not feeling very inclusive. It's really creating some silos, if you will, within the organization. And then justice, when that's missing, you get the cynicism, maybe some quiet resentment, and you risk attrition. And often on the surface, everything looks fine, but you can feel the emotion. And sometimes, too, what we've also learned is when certain needs are grouped together, they can give in different indications. So, for instance, if we're just staying on that foundational level, right, of the safety, autonomy, inclusion, and justice, when safety and autonomy get activated together, that can indicate stress within the organization and possible burnout. So it could mean that maybe jobs are mismatched or workload isn't equal or evened out. So it may be you want to look at some of those things, because safety, people don't feel safe and they don't feel that they're in control. So those are indicators of possible burnout for people. And it could be, and then so you have to look at it right from is it the individual? So if an individual, maybe they need time management or energy management. But if it's across a department or a division, well, maybe there's more going on, and it's more about the systems that are in place. So those are some of the things to look at.
So, Lynn, you gave us an example earlier about a company that did score very high as far as like engagement. But then when you look underneath, there were some issues. How did that team handle the issues, and how did they use AgileBrain to help them, and what were the steps that they took?
Yeah, great question, right? Because, okay, fine. Now we have this information. What do we do with the information, right? What's the application behind it? So as I mentioned, we did that cross section. We pulled in the next level to really get some more indication from them as to how this could be approached. So we were able to really pinpoint it. And it involved us really increasing transparency. So for justice, they needed to increase some transparency and clarify some criteria. For purpose, we really needed to reconnect the initiatives to the mission, because that's what was attracting people. And that's also what energized people. So we had to kind of align the reward systems with their values. And that's another important thing, which I'll come back to. But clarify the why before the what sometimes. Sometimes we just jump into a what, but it's really important for people to understand the why behind things. And then just some small clarity shifts dramatically reduce the friction. For the owner, I mean, I'll never forget the owner, when we showed the aggregate, he kind of pushed himself away from the table and like stared at this, because he said they had gone through a lot of acquisition within a short amount of time. And after every acquisition, he was like, I travel, but he's like, sometimes I don't communicate why I'm traveling. So it could be perceived a certain way. So It's about making sure people understand the why behind different things.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No. The other thing I just wanted to mention, which is important, is values. They did have values for their organization, which I think is really important, because those are your guardrails for decision making. So I just worked with another organization. They just went through a leadership transition, and the new leadership really wanted to kind of start some strategic planning, but they didn't really have the values defined. So we did use this process to help them really hone in on what their core values were for the organization.
How did you use this process to help them establish their core values? That's interesting.
Yeah, it was, well, so it was interesting because I had mentioned that, what are your core values? They're like, well, we have some that we think that we have, but nothing has been shared with the rest of the organization. So I had mentioned that really needs to be defined. And she said, it's two owners. And one of the owners was like, we did this exercise several years ago where all these values were listed on a piece of paper and we had to pick. And she's like, I hated that process because she's like, it didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel, and she's like, we all use these similar words, but they don't feel, I felt like I was using the same one as the company down the street, which is when we're all using the same words, but where's the real meaning? So I said, well, we could try AgileBrain and see what comes of it. And we went through the process and we looked at what was coming up for both of the owners and where there was alignment and maybe where there wasn't. And they have defined their values and it just feels more authentic to them.
Very cool example. So in this organization, well, you mentioned two.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
Right.
not sorry. No, you were giving good examples. So I wasn't specific. So do you go back then and retest? And how quickly do you do that? So when you see that there are some issues, do you go back like a year later and say, we're better in these areas? Like, how does that process look like?
Yeah. So the thing with AgileBrain too is there is a prompt and you can change the prompt to whatever is necessary. So when I think about working at this organization, that will help you get at the culture. When I think about my relationships, or when I think about leading this organization, I think that was the one we did around the values, because it gets at what's most important to us. So you can use this to gauge how progress is being made, especially like with change initiatives, any change initiatives that you do, it will give you a good indication of if it's moving along well and where the stress points might be for the group, because it's those certain areas are getting activated. So you can then have conversation around, okay, why do people feel out of control, or they're not immersing in this, or they don't feel recognized, or whatever from the 12 cells.
This is all so eye-opening, isn't it? I really love the assessment and everything that gets discussed around it. And for me, I connected to it very quickly, like I said, and I'm curious about your experience with other organizations that have taken this, maybe even at a larger scale. What tends to be, in your experience, when we're talking about the emotional gifts, which of the 12 tends to create like the biggest aha moment for leaders, especially when they recognize it in themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I would have to say justice, right? Leaders are often shocked by how strongly perceived fairness drives behavior. And sometimes what they thought was resistance was often perceived inequity. And that changes everything, right? So it's framing things a little bit differently and giving a different perspectives. But I would have to say justice, because we all want to feel like we're doing things that are fair and just, but sometimes it doesn't always, our actions don't always create that perception.
And justice could be such a big area where people feel like they're not getting credit where credit is
Right.
due, or not getting recognized.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times people look at justice meaning a major issue where somebody's doing something significantly wrong,
Like unethical,
unethical,
Mhm.
but it
Exactly.
could be a lot of these little areas.
Yeah, exactly. And what I have to tell individuals is, and you saw the report gives you that first page with the 12 cells. And when certain needs are unmet, they get activated. They become a darker blue. It's like a heat map. So I tell individuals, I had one organization push back, right? They're like, well, what good does this do me, right? What does this even say? And I said, it's almost like your check engine light. So when your check engine light goes on, you don't always know what's going on with the car, right? You have to pop the hood and do a deeper dive. And that's really what this gets at. It's not going to like reveal everything for you. You have to, that's why I say it's not for the faint of heart. Unless you really, really want to know and you plan to do something with the information, I don't recommend, this isn't for you, but it does allow you to have deeper conversations and more quickly get to the root cause. Because we spend a lot of time and energy with a Band-Aid approach on a lot of things.
Yep. I think being vulnerable is an opportunity for a lot of organizations. It's also the scariest stinking thing you can ever do. Like, just honestly, I personally am very uncomfortable with it. And so I think there's a lot to be said for just even the assessment, introducing that to organizations and that opening up a broader spectrum of thought process and diving into the deeper details. When that sort of happens, right, like after leaders begin to start to understand their own emotional patterns through this work, like what changes are you often seeing or typically the first ones to take place? So like, especially in how they start showing up for their teams. What noticeable difference is kind of like the first one you see take place?
Yeah, I mean, because it is looking at things from a different lens, and it's more, you're looking at it more systemically, right? So they kind of stop projecting. So I would say that's one thing. They realize, the other thing too, which is important, they realize not everyone is motivated possibly the way they are. We're all motivated by different things. And I know HR sings that all the time, but for leaders to really understand that, they also pause and ask better questions. And if you can sometimes personalize the motivation, that's when you begin lighting a fire within someone, not just under them. And that's a very different. You want people to be intrinsically motivated. So these are some of, they just see a different energy happening, but they take a more intentional process, I guess I would say.
Knowledge is power, right?
Knowledge is, well, so you hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask the question, is it knowledge that's power?
If you take action, right?
Bam.
Yes.
It's the application.
Yes.
That gold star, Maria.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
This isn't her first rodeo.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. Look
My
at this.
second.
Oh, geez. Caught me so off guard. I'm choking over here. No, I'm beaming with pride. I love that she nailed that. Way to go, Maria.
Yes.
That's my leader in action. What?
Yes. Yes. And a lot of times you might want to take action. It's just, sometimes there's just so much to do.
Yeah.
But you cannot, if you do not have a good, thriving culture, then there's nothing more important, correct?
Yeah.
Then you could do whatever. You can work on many, many different things, but nothing's going to get you to the point you want to be.
Yeah. And it's about being intentional with your culture, because culture will just create itself if you're not intentional. And sometimes it's not what you probably had in mind.
That is correct. That is correct, sir. I actually been saying that in some of my marketing meetings, and the sad thing is nobody knows what that's from. Remember, that was Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon. So a lot of people don't even know that, because this is back from the 1930s of when I was born, right? But Ed McMahon would be in the background and be like, that is correct, sir. He would say that all the time. And I will say that, and people just look at me like, what are you talking about? And I am not a sir. So, okay. So with that said, again, great conversation. So for people listening today and they want to know what to do, like what is the next step if they want to actually bring AgileBrain back to their company? what advice would you give them?
AgileBrain should never be deployed as a standalone tool. It really must be integrated into leadership development. That's why I've built a year-long motivational management certification program grounded in this framework, so leaders build the muscle to translate emotional insight into action, because data without development is dangerous, quite honestly. And if an organization isn't prepared to adjust behavior, systems, leadership practices, I won't recommend they use this. Again, to me, leadership is at a turning point. We've optimized strategy, we've optimized performance systems, but we haven't optimized emotional literacy. And in a VUCA world, and I talked about the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity, the constant is human need. If we don't understand what drives people emotionally, we're going to keep solving the wrong problems. So AgileBrain gives us a language for what's been invisible. But once you see it, you have a responsibility to lead differently. And like I said earlier, lighting a fire under someone will never be as powerful as lighting it within them. So, and I am excited to be collaborating with Dr. J.D. Pincus on the next book, exploring exactly that, how this framework moves from insight to application in business. So stay tuned so you get another
Awesome.
book.
Absolutely.
Sound like number 4.
Yeah, it does.
I love that, Lynn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We love talking to you. We love assessments. We love evaluations, and digging into how these things can work. So it is always a pleasure. I don't want to give you the wrong impression that this episode is over, though, because we have one more thing on the docket, okay? And we've adjusted some things for you as a 3-timer, so I hope you're ready. But it's that time. It's the TTA 10.
It's the TTA 10, 10 final questions for our guest.
One of our better timing transitions, David. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate it, bud. Lynn, so you know the TTA 10. 10 questions, fun, playful. Answer them as quickly as you can. Here's the change. You don't get 90 seconds this time because you are a veteran at this point. So we're cutting it down to 60. And we'll see how it all turns out at the end. But I believe in you and that
this
agile
is the Olympics.
brain.
Wow.
Right? Are you ready?
Okay, ready.
Okay. All right, David. 60 seconds, please.
All
Get
right.
it on the clock and
60
count me down.
seconds on the TTA 10 clock starting now.
What is 200 minus 10?
190.
If your personality was a weather pattern, what would it be?
Sunny.
Coffee or tea? How do you take it?
Tea. Honey.
You get a surprise day off tomorrow. What's the first thing that you're doing?
Sleeping.
What's 3 things you'd bring to a deserted island but no phone?
Chapstick. I wouldn't even bring a phone. I'd bring chapstick, suntan lotion, and a hat.
Awesome. If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, chocolate.
What's 2 times 2?
4.
If your current, it says season of life. I don't like that. If your current phase of your life had a title, what would it be?
As my current season of life, why fall? I don't know.
Would you rather be able to fly or read minds?
Fly.
What is one word that people would use to describe you?
Talkative.
All right, that's 10 questions. Let's give her a few seconds back for my stumble, David, and then
I was thinking like your questions might have been longer than the answers. So.
Adjusting here for the season of life debacle.
Yeah, I just didn't like the term, man.
Lynn comes in at 57 seconds. She is just barely under the threshold. What a moment.
Yeah,
We're going to need 20 seconds for episode 4. Just practice now.
I know, exactly.
Well, we wanted something special for this moment, the 3-timer. Her jacket's being made, by the way, the smoking jacket, of course. We do have a musical salute. If you can't hear this, guys, just wave your arms, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to hear it. And without further ado, here's a song called At the Core with Lynn Turner.
She's been small, biz, scrappy, corporate cool. Seen the boardroom buzz and the break room blues. She studied the patterns, the why and the how. Now she's helping leaders level up. Right now she says, hold up, before you waste for more. Let's dig a little deeper to the core. It's not just numbers, profit or
It's a banger.
plan. It's people and passion that power the brand. Changes in magic, it's steps you take. Align your vision, watch the culture wake. Lynn Turner, bringing insight to life.
You could listen to this song if you have the day off tomorrow. Get it? Because she said she wanted to sleep.
Motivators to strategy. She's building
Lynn thought that was hysterical. She's laughing so hard.
It is. Nice martini.
There you go.
I love that. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Oh my God,
Those
that
listening to the podcast couldn't see Lynn on stage dancing
Yes.
with some
I know.
random
my
boy band.
Yes,
There you go.
exactly.
Well, that's, and like, honestly, like, I was like, this is like a boy band bop. I was jamming. The dance break was absolutely warranted.
Thank you for that.
Very, very
That
good.
was so funny. Lynn, thank you, my friend, for
Thank you.
all of your contributions and for joining us again on another episode. We can't wait for the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Yes,
much,
and I'll
Lynn.
get you your books out.
Always a pleasure.
Pronto. Take care.
Oh, awesome. Good
Bye-bye.
episode.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good stuff.
If you're interested in using AgileBrain to shape your teams and culture, visit us at thetrainingassociates.com. We'll see you later.